Hey guys, tonight we tumble backward through time into the hazy, half-forgotten world of sleep, a place that used to be a whole lot messier, creepier, and surprisingly social. You think your sleep is bad? Maybe you toss and turn, maybe your pillow is slightly too warm on one side, or maybe the neighbor's dog has chosen 317 as its moment to shine, but at least you're not waking up with a chicken perched on your chest or a ghost whispering Latin in your left ear. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your city and local time in the comments. Let's see who's nodding off around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying on a packed dirt floor. It's cold. There's straw under your back, but not enough to matter. Something is rustling nearby, probably a pig, or maybe that's the dog. Either way, it's your bedmate tonight. You pull a wool blanket tighter across your shoulders. It smells like old rain and mutton. You cough just once, and somewhere outside, a sheep bleats like it's filing a complaint. Welcome to the Bronze Age bedtime. No memory foam, no chamomile tea, and definitely no relaxing ocean wave white noise loop. This is a time when beds weren't a given. In many prehistoric and ancient cultures, sleep happened wherever there was warmth and relative safety. Caves, huts, tree shelters, your options were limited. And if you had a fire going, great. But it attracted smoke, insects, and every cold nose in the tribe. You shift your weight to one side and try not to inhale the scent of whatever the toddler beside you had for dinner. It's a communal pile tonight, family, friends, animals, all curled into a mound of shared breath and shifting elbows. Comfort wasn't a priority, survival was, and the darkness. Let's talk about that. No street lamps, no iPhones, no late-night sitcom reruns, just total ink black dark. If the moon's out, great, you can maybe see your own toes, but otherwise, it's like sleeping in the middle of a shut drawer, which is lovely if you're a bat, less so if you need the bathroom. But even back then, dreams mattered. Ancient Mesopotamians believed sleep was a portal. They saw dreams as divine messages, often from gods who apparently had no concept of personal boundaries. You fall asleep hoping for rest and wake up with a divine to-do list carved into your subconscious. And then there's the paranoia, because night wasn't just for dreams, it was for danger. Saber-tooths, raiders, and rival tribes. People slept in shifts, one eye always half open. Historians still argue whether our ancestors slept in bursts or full cycles, but most agree it wasn't the blissful 8-hour stretch we pine for today. One cave site in southern France shows signs of humans arranging pine branches into floor padding. Cute, right, except pine needles itch like guilt and offer zero lumbar support. Meanwhile, in Egypt, they got fancy. Pharaohs had wooden headrests, basically tiny, elegant torture devices shaped like mini guillotines, ideal for neck pain and scaring away demons, multitasking. Some early communities even believed sleep itself was risky, that your soul could wander, or worse, be stolen. So charms, chants, and rituals grew around sleep like ivy. You wouldn't just lie down and drift off. You'd whisper prayers, light incense, or clutch a dried lizard leg just in case the night tried something. And ghosts. Oh, they were already showing up uninvited. Many early cultures thought dreams were visits from the dead. Not always unfriendly, but never quite chill either. A flickering flame at midnight might mean an ancestor had notes on your diet, or your behavior, or the way you trimmed your beard last week. You finally doze off, maybe. A shallow, fitful rest filled with animal noises, whispered worries, and the occasional snore that sounds like a mammoth trying to beatbox. And just when you sink into that blissful nothingness, a rooster screams into the void like it's doing vocal warm-ups for a heavy metal band. That's your alarm clock. Nature's most enthusiastic megaphone. You sit up. Your back cracks like firewood. You glance around the dim room, maybe a hut, maybe a cave. Everyone else is stirring too, hair stuck to their foreheads, eyes crusty with ancestral exhaustion. It's morning. Time to work, hunt, gather, build, repeat, sleep. You'll try again later, probably on the same patch of dirt, probably with the pig. So you trudge into the day, already counting the hours until you can try again. And not because you're lazy, because real sleep, is elusive, always just out of reach. It's been like that since forever. And somehow, that makes you feel better, doesn't it? Like maybe it's not your fault. Maybe the history of sleep was always a little sad. And maybe that ghost whispering in your dreams tonight? She just wants to know if she can borrow your blanket. You're reclining, sort of. The stone bench under your back is hard enough to shame a chiropractor, and the flickering oil lamp overhead is doing very little to soothe your nerves. Welcome to a Roman night. You're not exactly in a palace, but you've got walls, a ceiling, and something resembling furniture. That already makes you better off than most. Now, close your eyes. The smell of olive oil and dust clings to everything. Somewhere in the courtyard, a fountain gurgles like it's trying to hum a lullaby. You shift slightly and remember you're not just here to sleep. You're here to receive messages from the gods. No pressure. Romans took their dreams seriously, like divine appointments seriously. The practice of incubatio, or temple sleep, was a kind of ancient therapy meets psychic reading. You'd travel to a sacred site, say, the temple of Asclepius, fast beforehand, maybe abstain from garlic, weirdly common, and lie on a ceremonial bed overnight. If all went well, a god would visit you in your dreams with advice, healing, or a good old-fashioned riddle you'd need a priest to decode. And yes, this was considered medicine. Of course, if you weren't trying to talk to gods, you might have just been a citizen trying to survive the night without too much digestive drama. Roman diets were a mess of wine, fish sauce, and goat cheese, not a combo known for inspiring peaceful REM cycles. There are Roman records of people blaming night spirits or nocturnal demons for bad dreams. Historians still argue whether those were metaphors or early descriptions of sleep paralysis. And here's a detail you didn't ask for but will now never forget: Pliny the Elder, our favorite fact-hoarding Roman naturalist, once claimed that eating too much cheese before bed could cause ferocious dreams. He didn't clarify what those dreams involved, but one can only assume at least one lion and a disappointed grandmother. Weirdly, the Romans also believed the liver played a central role in dreams. Not the brain, the liver, that pinkish blob beneath your ribs, supposedly a psychic organ. The Stoics had a field day with this, writing entire essays on whether the soul curled up inside the liver like a cat on a radiator. You shift again. You're still not asleep. And now the street noise outside has started. Romans lived packed together apartment-style in multi-story buildings called insulae. The upper floors were cramped, poorly built, and prone to collapsing. Tenants slept amid cooking smells, chamber pot aromas, and neighbors who thought arguing at midnight was a competitive sport. You try counting sheep. You reach 6 before realizing you've never seen a sheep. You switch to counting gladiators. That works a bit better. Meanwhile, the elite, those lucky toga wearers, were lounging in slightly more luxurious quarters. Their bedrooms, called cubicula, were decorated with frescoes of dreamy gods and pastoral scenes. Wealthy Romans often had designated servants whose job it was to warm their beds with bronze pans of coal. That's not romantic. That's survival. Marble floors are cold. Still, even the rich couldn't escape the night. There's evidence that some insomniac Romans paced their gardens in the moonlight, composing speeches or fretting over politics. Others just muttered to themselves and stared at the stars. As you do, and then, as now, there were night owls. The writer Seneca complained about people partying loudly while he tried to study. He described late-night musicians, barkeepers, and neighbors dragging furniture as if they were testing their strength. Honestly, Seneca just wanted peace and quiet and maybe blackout curtains. You breathe deeply. You can hear the clink of armor as a city guard strolls past outside. Night patrols were common, meant to deter fires, thieves, and ironically, insomniac philosophers. You wonder how anyone ever managed a full night's sleep when sleep hygiene meant not sleeping directly under a leaking ceiling. You finally feel your body going slack. The stone isn't comfortable, but your brain is too tired to care. Your dreams begin. In them, you are flying, but not like a bird, more like a statue hurled across a forum. You land in a library. There's Cicero, flipping through scrolls and sipping wine. He looks up and says, "You should have had less cheese." You wake up sweating. Somewhere a rooster crows again. Was that a message from the gods? A bad reaction to fermented goat milk? Or just your overworked subconscious doing its best with what little rem it could scrape together? Historians still debate what Romans truly believed about dreams. Some say they saw them as omens, others as psychological reflections. But what's clear is that sleep wasn't just downtime. It was ritualized, philosophized, analyzed, and when you didn't sleep, that mattered too. Bad sleep was seen as a sign of spiritual imbalance or worse, a moral failing. You could be scorned for laziness or sleeplessness, depending on who was judging you and how loud their toga was. As dawn spills its golden fingers through the archway, you sit up on the stone bench. Your back aches. Your breath mists the air. Somewhere in your stomach, the goat cheese makes a final protest. Sleep, in ancient Rome, was complicated, wrapped in myth, medicine, and more than a little liver-related pseudoscience. And as you shuffle off to start your day, you can't help but smile. Because at least now, when you wake from a weird dream, you don't have to decode it with a priest. Probably. The bell tolls. Not once, not twice, but 9 times. You jolt upright in the cold. It's pitch dark, and every part of your body protests the interruption. Welcome to the monastic life, where sleep is more of a suggestion than a promise. You've just been summoned for matins, the midnight prayer that breaks your slumber like a clumsy monk dropping a chalice. You fumble for your robe, which feels like it was woven from frost itself. You slip on sandals, your breath already fogging in the air, and step into the cloister walk. The stones are so cold they feel wet. A fellow monk coughs beside you, a dry, papery sound that echoes like a reprimand. No one talks. Talking is for the daylight. Your days revolve around devotion and your nights are splintered because of it. Monks in medieval Europe adhered to a schedule known as the Divine Office, or Liturgy of the Hours. That meant prayers at specific times, matins around midnight or 2 a.m., then lauds before dawn, followed by prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline. Think of it as the world's least relaxing sleep app. You trudge through the nave of the chapel, where flickering candlelight casts holy shadows across stone walls. Gregorian chants rise, not from a speaker or Spotify playlist, but from real human voices, tired, cracking, reverent. You try to focus, but your mind drifts to sleep, sweet, forbidden sleep. Historically, this fragmented schedule had a name: biphasic sleep. Instead of one long stretch, sleep came in 2 parts, interrupted by waking hours. Between first sleep and second sleep, people often read, prayed, meditated, or worried about their eternal soul. Historians still argue whether this biphasic pattern was natural or enforced by lifestyle, light sources, or good old-fashioned religious guilt. What's certain is this: monks didn't sleep like we do, and you're starting to understand why their eyes always look 50% in heaven and 50% in REM withdrawal. You kneel, murmur prayers you've memorized since youth. The Latin syllables blend with the wind scraping against the stained glass. A bat flits silently across the rafters. You're not afraid. You're just exhausted. The thing is, this wasn't just a test of discipline, it was a badge of honor. The less you slept, the more devout you were. Fatigue meant faith. There are records of holy men boasting about their minimal sleep, 2 hours a night. One, if I'm lucky, it's the spiritual equivalent of today's CEOs bragging about 4 a.m. gym sessions. One particularly intense monk, Saint Macarius of Alexandria, allegedly slept standing up in a corner. Another, Saint Anthony the Great, was said to stay awake for entire nights battling inner demons, which frankly sounds a lot like trying to sleep after reading work emails at 11 p.m. You think you're hallucinating. You see the flicker of something, an angel. A trick of the waxy light, you blink. It's just Brother Thomas, nodding off mid-prayer and nearly face-planting into his psalter. Even monks had limits. Sleep deprivation among the devout led to fascinating results. Some experienced vivid dreams or waking visions. Others developed what modern scholars would likely diagnose as psychosis, but back then, it was divine communication. Still kneeling, your knees start to scream. The floor might as well be carved from spite. Finally, the chant concludes. A low rustle as the monks rise and return to their cells. You shuffle behind them, not fully awake, not fully asleep. Back in your cell stone, sparse. Sanctified, you lie back down. This is the sliver of sleep you might get before dawn prayers. You curl into your robe. The straw-stuffed mattress creaks beneath you. There's a single candle sputtering in the corner, casting dancing shadows that seem to whisper secrets. And then, bliss. You slip into a shallow, warm pool of sleep. No dreams, just release. You wake again before sunrise, this time to laud. The cycle continues. 7 times a day, and sometimes twice a night. You're on your knees, chanting, singing, asking forgiveness, praising, reading psalms. The sleep you do get becomes a luxury, an act of grace. And yet, there's comfort in it too. This strict rhythm gives your life structure. It creates a sacred predictability in an unpredictable world. No matter what sins haunted your thoughts or what illnesses brewed in your gut, you always knew what time you'd be woken up and what Latin verse you'd be mumbling when it happened. There's a curious calm to that. But not everyone outside the monastery saw it that way. Many lay people, those poor, grubby peasants, saw monks as eccentric or overly extreme. And not without reason. You're over here sleeping 4 hours across 2 shifts, while they're bundling up in barns and accidentally spooning goats. Still, there's something oddly modern about it all. Today, people pay money for sleep training. They set alarms for intentional wakefulness. But the monks were already doing it with no Instagram accounts to document their journey. You roll your shoulders. There's a warm ache that suggests maybe, just maybe, your prayers counted as exercise. You light another candle and stare at the flame. It dances, uncertain, on the edge of blowing out. Kind of like you. The bell tolls again. Not loudly, just once. You sigh, pull your robe tighter, and rise to face yet another hour of prayer, another sliver of sleep surrendered to devotion. And as you walk past the open cloister, the cold stone biting at your feet, you spot the moon through a high window, pale, watching, silent. She's been up all night too. You duck through the low wooden doorway, stooping automatically even though you've done this 1,000 times. Inside, the hut smells like smoked meat, boiled turnips, and the kind of dampness that settles deep into your bones. Welcome to a peasant's bedroom, also known as the only room. This isn't just where you sleep. It's where you eat, cook, sew, argue, give birth, gossip, and occasionally shelter the chickens during bad weather. The hearth glows faintly, sending orange light across the floor packed tight with straw and mud. You call it a bed. It's more like a flammable suggestion of comfort. Sleep in the medieval countryside is a patchwork of habit and hope. Your mattress, a linen sack filled with straw. Soft. If you replace the straw regularly, you haven't. So it's lumpy and alive with bugs, fleas, mites, and the occasional brave rat treat your sleeping area like it's an open market Airbnb. You curl into your blanket. It's wool, thick, and coarse enough to exfoliate a rhino, but it's warm, and warmth is currency in this part of the world. The fire's nearly out. You'll have to relight it in the morning with flint, breath, and pure desperation. Peasant life means sleep isn't about rest. It's about getting horizontal when the body can't continue. You sleep when the work stops, which is rarely. Farming life starts at sunrise and ends when your fingers stop obeying. In winter, there's more dark time, which means slightly more sleep. In summer, good luck. You hear your neighbor cough through the wall. The walls are wattle and daub sticks woven together and smeared with mud. Soundproofing isn't a thing. You know when they argue. You know when they sneeze. and they definitely know you snore. Your kids sleep nearby, curled in their own straw nests like tired puppies. You share the room with your spouse, your children, your dog, and sometimes a guest or two. Privacy is a myth. You once tried to sneeze discreetly and startled a goat. The concept of a bedroom doesn't exist yet, not for you. That's a luxury reserved for nobles and merchants, people who actually own chairs with backs. You lie close to the fire, feet near the warmest part, heads angled away from the smoke. Chimneys are rare, so the soot rises, swirls, and settles like night snow. Your lungs hate it, but your toes are grateful. You scratch your shoulder. Another flea, you sigh. Medieval records actually mention complaints of bedbugs and biting fleas, so it's not just you being dramatic. One chronicler even claimed fleas were penance in miniature, a very poetic way to say itchy suffering. Outside, the wind howls, the wooden shutters creak. Wolves exist, and they're not always shy. You've heard stories of them sneaking into homes, especially when food is scarce. You clutch your blanket tighter. Your dog growls low just once. You whisper a thanks. Some nights, sleep comes easy, bone-deep fatigue pulling you under like a warm tide. Other nights, not so much. The aches, the cold, the snores, the murmured sleep talk of your brother-in-law across the room. He always mutters about bread. Every single night, you wonder about dreams. You had one last week, something about flying. Not like a bird, more like floating above the fields, watching your family below, hoeing and harvesting. You didn't tell anyone. Dreams can be tricky. Some folks say they're omens. Others say they're the devil's whisperings. Better to keep that one to yourself. You remember your grandmother used to tell stories about spirits that visit at night? The mare. She said a pale creature that rides your chest while you sleep, squeezing breath from your lungs. You thought it was just a scary story. Then you had that one night, a year ago, when you woke frozen, eyes open, unable to move or speak. You swore you saw a shadow near the ceiling. Sleep paralysis, modern scholars would say. But you don't know that term. You just sleep with garlic under your bed now, just in case. There's also the nightly gossip. You whisper with your partner in the dark. Soft voices, the day's nonsense. Who stole the eggs? Who insulted whom? Who's maybe cursed? This is your quiet time. Your version of scrolling through social media before bed. Except instead of memes, it's "Did you hear Martha saw a fairy by the well again?" And it's not just you. Medieval chroniclers wrote of peasants using this in-between time, the space between first sleep and second sleep, for chatting, praying, even sneaking out to visit neighbors. Yep, that's right. A medieval midnight hangout. No clubs, just candlelight and scandal. You shift in your straw, trying not to rustle too loudly. You're used to the noises now, the squeaks, snores, grunts, the occasional sudden fart that everyone pretends didn't happen. It's like a symphony composed by exhaustion and beans. At some point, you drift off again, and when you wake next, light is just beginning to spill through the cracks in the wall. Your back aches and your nose is cold. But hey, you survived another night. You stretch, sort of. The ceiling's too low to stand upright, so you settle for a hunched shuffle toward the door. You step outside, blink at the pale sun, and feel the weight of the day ahead. Sleep will return tonight. Maybe better, maybe worse. Either way, the straw will still be there. The fleas too. And if you're lucky, the fire won't go out again. And if your dreams bring strange visitors, just don't tell Martha. She'll absolutely start a rumor. You pull back the curtain. It's heavy velvet or wool or something equally dramatic, and it slides across the carved wooden rail with a sighing hiss. Inside, your bed is not just a bed, it's a statement. 4 thick posts, carved with spirals and lions, support a canopy meant to keep out drafts, dust, and let's be honest, peasants. You're rich, or at least noble enough to fake it. Welcome to medieval luxury. where a good night's sleep comes with tassels, drapery, and the silent judgment of 8 generations worth of ancestral portraits staring down at you from the walls. You climb into bed, yes. Climb, it's tall enough to need a footstool. Your mattress is stuffed with feathers. Real feathers, possibly stolen from 100 angry geese. The linen sheets have been aired. The embroidered coverlet is thick and heavy, trapping warmth like a gentle, floral-scented avalanche. This isn't just about comfort, it's about status. In the Middle Ages, a good bed wasn't hidden away in a private room. It was proudly on display, sometimes right in the main hall. Visitors saw it, envied it, whispered about the number of pillows. Historians still argue whether medieval beds were meant more for sleep or social signaling, but the answer is probably yes. You settle into your throne of slumber. Servants have already warmed the sheets with brass pans filled with coals. A child servant called a page helped you undress. If you're royalty, someone might have even read to you. No audiobooks, just Gregory, age 11, mumbling a psalm with sleepy accuracy. You hear voices outside. The walls are stone, but the windows are simple slits covered with oiled parchment. So you still hear the stable boys arguing about manure. Still, you're insulated from most of life's unpleasantness. No smoke in the eyes, no straw in awkward places, and most crucially, your bed has curtains, not for modesty, for warmth. Curtains on beds were the medieval version of a space heater, helping trap body heat in a room with zero insulation and no central heating. Inside the bed curtains, it's cozy, dark, and quiet. Outside, it's cold, chaotic, and full of drafty hallways. No wonder some nobles stayed in bed for hours after waking, conducting business and issuing commands from beneath their embroidered covers like sleepy monarchs of blanket land. But don't get too comfortable, because here's the twist: your bed is shared. Maybe not every night, but often, important guests might be invited to sleep beside you. Not in a romantic way, just in this is the only warm place, and also we're bonding kind of way. Royal beds were often sites of diplomacy, gossip, and the kind of pillow talk that could shape kingdoms. And let's not forget sickness. When nobles fell ill, their beds became sick rooms, and sometimes theaters of death. Whole families would gather around the dying, whispering prayers, passing drinks, clutching hands. The four-poster bed became a stage for both grandeur and grief. One French noble's will specifically requested a bed of softest feathers, curtains blue and gold, for his deathbed, because if you're going to cough yourself into eternity, you might as well do it like a legend. You fluff your pillow, embroidered with your family crest. The stitching scratches a bit, but again status. You're vaguely aware of the rats in the walls. Even stone castles had them. In fact, wealthy households were sometimes more infested than peasant huts, thanks to the abundance of stored grain and neglected corners. You say a quick prayer. The night still carries mystery. Sleep is seen as a shadow of death, and dreams as omens. You hope for a vision of something divine, or at least flattering. You close your eyes and instantly open them again. Something moved in the dark. You grab the candle stub by your bedside, just in case it's not a mouse. It's just your imagination. Probably. Even the rich feared night. Ghost stories weren't just for tavern folk. Nobles had their own legends: headless horsemen, cursed corridors, haunted bedchambers where long-dead lovers wept at midnight. One 13th-century noblewoman claimed her bedchamber was visited nightly by a night-shaped shadow who whispered soon. She switched rooms. It didn't help. There's also the problem of fire. A single overturned candle could destroy your entire manor, so bedtime rituals were strict snuff candles. Bank the hearth. Lock the doors from the inside. Trust was not trending. Eventually, sleep claims you. The bed creaks once, settling like a ship in a quiet harbor. You dream of banquets and battles and maybe something weird involving a turnip dressed as the Pope. That's between you and your subconscious. Morning arrives, not with a gentle chirp, but with a knock. The servant is already bustling in with warm water, bread, and news. You pretend to still be asleep for 3 more delicious minutes. Because in this century, if you're lucky enough to have curtains around your bed, sometimes they're the only thing keeping the world out. You peek through them and sigh. Another day of appearances, alliances, and pretending you didn't dream about vegetables again. But at least, for now, you've got the best bed in the house, and everyone knows it. You wake with a jolt, not because of a noise, not because of cold, but because of something far worse, a feeling, the kind that wraps around your chest like a damp rope and whispers, "You're not alone." You sit up in your medieval bed, its wooden frame groaning beneath you. The fire in the hearth has died to orange embers, and the room is still, too still. The tapestries on the walls, meant to block the cold, now seem to muffle sound in an eerie way. You listen. Nothing. Then, softly, a creak. Welcome to the haunted night, where sleep is optional and the undead have no respect for bedtime boundaries. In the medieval world, ghosts weren't just spooky stories, they were problems. Legitimate, socially acknowledged issues. If someone was murdered, betrayed, or buried without proper rites, they didn't just rest uneasily, they came back. And they didn't politely haunt castles or abandoned mills. They came to your bedroom, stood at the foot of your bed, and breathed just loud enough to make your spine develop opinions. Church records are full of mentions, spectral visitations, moaning spirits, the unquiet dead. 112th century English chronicler, Orderic Vitalis, casually describes monks being haunted by a dead knight who refused to rest until his debts were paid. Imagine dying and getting stuck in collections. And this fear didn't only live in the minds of storytellers. Communities took it seriously. Exorcisms, masses for the dead, even digging up and reburying corpses with specific rituals, these weren't rare. If a ghost kept showing up in your dreams, you didn't just shrug it off. You called your priest, your neighbors, and maybe your second cousin who used to know herbs. Historians still argue whether these hauntings were psychological responses to trauma, or if they reflected something deeper, a medieval sense that the boundary between the living and dead was tissue thin after sundown. And not all ghosts were strangers. Sometimes it was someone you knew, a parent, a friend, a spouse. In fact, many medieval accounts describe dream visitations by deceased loved ones who appeared not to spook, but to scold. You've forgotten my prayers. You haven't lit candles for my soul. You remarried already. You whisper apologies into the dark and promise to attend Mass tomorrow. Maybe 2 Masses, maybe 3. Just please don't let that shadow at the end of the bed move again. But ghosts weren't the only nighttime terror. Guilt could be just as sleepless. If you'd lied, stolen, cheated, even just thought about it too much, you could lie awake for hours under the pressure of a world where sins were real, deadly, and often punishable by both God and Geoffrey the village gossip. And in the dead of night, that guilt swelled. You'd remember things you barely noticed during the day, harsh words, forgotten vows, the way you secretly wished your neighbor's cow would just vanish one day. You stare at the ceiling and hope that confession will clean the slate. Of course, penance sometimes added to the sleep problem. Some devout believers voluntarily disrupted their rest, waking in the middle of the night to pray, flagellate themselves, or walk barefoot in the cold. Because, comfort is a trap. You turn on your side. The feather pillow shifts beneath your head. You think you hear footsteps. You hold your breath. It's the cat. Probably, maybe, it could also be an imp. The tiny, demonic beings medieval folklore claimed snuck into homes through cracks in the wood. They whispered temptations, tickled your feet, or sat on your chest until you woke, gasping. One 14th century tale blames a whole town's insomnia on a traveling imp with an attitude problem. You pull the covers tighter, you light a candle, just for a bit, and if ghosts and imps weren't enough, there was also the fear of dying in your sleep. For real, it wasn't uncommon. Disease, poor nutrition, damp walls, these things were always lurking. Death wasn't abstract. It was in your house, sometimes in your lungs. You say your prayers again, one more time, just in case the earlier round was rushed. Even kings feared the night. Charlemagne reportedly had someone always sleeping nearby, partly for protection, but partly, you suspect, so he wouldn't be alone. Sleep was vulnerable. It meant lowering your guard, letting go. For a world so obsessed with sin, salvation, and things that went bump in the candlelight, that kind of surrender was terrifying. You finally drift off. The candle gutter's low. Your breathing evens out. And then, a knock. Not loud. Just once. You don't move. You don't breathe. You wait, but nothing follows. Just the fire's slow sigh and the faint, rhythmic drip of something in the far corner of the room. Probably not blood. Probably. When morning finally comes, it's like someone yanked a shroud off your soul. You open the window and let the light in like a benediction. The night is over. For now, you stretch. You survived. And you make a mental note to donate at least 3 candles to the church this week, just to be safe. Because the next time something knocks, you might not be the only one awake. You wake up in the dark not because you have to, not because something startled you, but because this is normal. You glance around your tiny chamber. The fire has dimmed to nothing but sleepy embers, and the air feels still, like the whole world is pausing. But you're awake. Not fully, not with clarity, but awake enough to sit up, stretch, and reach for your candle. You're between what people used to call first sleep and second sleep, a perfectly natural break in the night that modern life has all but forgotten. Yes, segmented sleep was real. It wasn't weird. It wasn't dysfunctional. It was routine. Across medieval Europe and even earlier, most people didn't expect to sleep in one long, uninterrupted stretch. Instead, they slipped into 2 distinct blocks of rest, separated by an hour or 2 of wakefulness. That quiet middle space, the watch, as some called it, was its own little world. You might read scripture, whisper prayers, tend to a baby, rekindle the fire, or, if you were feeling particularly bold, sneak next door for a visit. And no, not all these midnight meetups were innocent. There are entire medieval poems that wink at secret trysts and hallway rendezvous during the wake period. Apparently, the libido also had a circadian rhythm. Historians still argue whether this time was encouraged as a spiritual practice or simply an accidental side effect of a candlelit society. You don't light the candle tonight. You just sit in the stillness, letting the dark cradle your thoughts. It's not insomnia. You don't feel anxious. This is contemplative. You remember the shepherd you talked to last week who said he always wakes around this hour just to look out the window. The stars talk more clearly now, he'd said, eyes twinkling like he wasn't just talking about stars. Even nobles did it. There's a letter from a 15th century French baron who wrote to his brother during the watch, describing dreams and business ideas and how he'd nearly fallen out of bed trying to chase a rat. He called it his second day a bonus hour when the world was silent and his mind unchained. You walk to the shutter, gently open it. The night breathes against your face, cool, damp, soft. It smells like soil and old wood. The moon hangs like a watching eye, low and yellow, as if it's keeping a secret just for you. There's a rooster crowing far too early. You forgive him. He's confused, like most of us. You sit back on your bed, still warm. You trace a knot in the wooden headboard with your fingertip and feel sleep brushing gently against your temples again. Not rushing. Just waiting. People didn't stress over this gap. There was no panic, no glowing screen in their faces, no counting hours until the alarm. In fact, many considered this watch a gift, a time to speak to God or your spouse or your own rattling thoughts, while the rest of the village floated in dreams. You lie back down, pull the blanket higher. The pillow cradles your head, a little damp, but familiar. You can hear your family's soft breathing in the next room. The fire crackles once, like it's sighing. Sleep returns easily. This second sleep, it's often deeper, dreamier, more luxurious. You melt into it like warm wax, mind softened by the pause. Your body knows this rhythm. It's older than clocks, older than sermons. It belongs to a version of you that modern life forgot but still echoes in quiet, tired moments. And the dreams are different, not frantic or nonsensical. Slower, more vivid. You're walking through a green forest, not just walking, you feel it. The piney scent, the soft earth under your bare feet, the way the light breaks through the branches like golden dust. You hear someone call your name, not a shout, just a voice. And you wake. Morning, not from jarring noise or flashing screens, just a natural return. The first beams of sunlight creep across the wall. Your body feels rested, not because you slept longer, but because you slept smarter. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing the night gave you 2 chances, 2 cycles, a built-in reboot. Modern science actually backs this up. Studies of people exposed only to natural light over long periods found they, too, adopted segmented sleep, first a deep sleep, then a period of wakefulness, then another dream-drenched nap. Your ancestors didn't invent it, they just accepted it. Today, we fight it, blame ourselves for being awake at 2008, stare at our phones, count sheep until we hate sheep. But what if it's not broken sleep? What if it's just forgotten sleep? You smile as you rise from bed. You've got chores, tasks, life. But for once, you don't resent the night, because you weren't restless. You were just between dreams. You roll over and accidentally elbow someone in the face. A soft grunt, followed by a rustle of limbs, and then a muttered, "Watch it." You mumble an apology and shift closer to the edge of the bed where, surprise, someone else's feet are already occupying the space. Welcome to medieval group sleeping, where personal space is more of a rumor than a right. You're not in a peasant hovel tonight. You're traveling. Maybe you're a tradesman passing through town. Maybe a minor noble on a pilgrimage. Or maybe you just drank too much ale at the inn and couldn't make it home. Either way, you've been offered a place to sleep, and that means sharing a bed with strangers, possibly a lot of them, and not just for budget reasons. In pre-modern Europe, sleep was communal. Beds were shared between friends, family, co-workers, even travelers who met on the road just hours earlier. You were lucky if everyone had bathed recently and no one talked in their sleep about crimes. You lie flat on your back, arms pressed tightly to your sides like a mummy trying not to offend anyone. To your left, a merchant snores in steady, foghorn-like pulses. To your right, a washerwoman is already dreaming of soap, or maybe revenge. You don't know. You don't ask. Inns were notorious for it. One record from a 15th century English guest house describes a single bed housing 6 grown adults and 1 small pig who reportedly refused to leave. No one kicked it out, because warmth was warmth. There was even a name for this bundling in. It wasn't always innocent teenagers, sometimes used it for courtship, lying fully clothed under strict supervision to chat and flirt before marriage. But most bundling wasn't romantic. It was just necessary. You pull your blanket up higher. It doesn't help much because it's already being shared. You can't move without brushing against someone else's limbs, and the room smells faintly of wood smoke, old wool, and mild panic. You wonder if this is normal. It is. In fact, not sleeping with others was considered odd in many places and times. Entire families, parents, grandparents, children piled into bed together like sleepy, tangled furniture, not for closeness. Not for love, though that happened, too, but for warmth. Human bodies were free heating systems. Privacy was a luxury of the rich. Even nobles sometimes shared beds with close companions, especially during travel. There's a letter from 16th century England in which 2 diplomats joke about trying to discuss state secrets while sharing a mattress full of feathers and 1 very determined weasel. And don't forget servants. If you were rich, your attendants might sleep in the same room, or even at the foot of your bed, just in case you needed a nightcap, a midnight prayer, or someone to threaten a ghost with a stick. Historians still argue whether people liked this setup or simply endured it. There's evidence of strong emotional bonds being formed between bedfellows' lifelong friendships, confessions, gossip shared at whisper level under itchy blankets, but there's also plenty of grumbling in letters and diaries about snoring, blanket theft, and mysterious nocturnal elbowings. You consider rolling over, then you remember there's nowhere to roll to. You sigh. Someone begins humming softly an old lullaby. You don't recognize the words, but the melody is gentle. It weaves through the room like smoke, calming in its quiet persistence. The woman beside you whispers something about the weather tomorrow. You respond without thinking. A little chat, midnight talk, no one's watching. This is what passed for social media, the shared warmth of exhausted humans whispering half-thoughts into the dark. You shift and find a slightly less horrible angle. You wonder who the person at the foot of the bed is. They haven't moved all night. You hope that's a good sign. At some point, you drift off not deeply, not all at once, but in layers, like slipping through a crowded room of half-formed dreams. You hear a story about a night made entirely of bees. You see a goose in a wig. It makes sense, somehow. Morning comes in grunts and groans. Someone sneezes directly into the void. Someone else mumbles about stiff joints and cold feet. You stretch cautiously, then sit up. A few of your bedmates are already up and out the door. You pull on your boots, straighten your cloak, and nod to the ones who remain. No names exchanged. Just tired glances. A silent thanks for not stealing the blanket. You head outside, into the brisk air. There's a fog clinging to the rooftops. You're stiff, underslept, and vaguely disoriented. But somehow, okay, because that bed, that weird, crowded mess of elbows and dreams and borrowed heat, that was community, not comfort, not luxury, but a kind of low-key trust that says, we're all just trying to get through the night. And despite the snoring merchant and the foot in your ribs, you kind of miss it already. The candle is burning low, and your fingers tremble as you trace the sign of the cross for the third time in a row. You whisper a prayer not because you feel particularly holy, but because you're terrified. It's the Inquisition. The air itself feels suspicious. You lie awake, heart hammering like it's trying to escape through your ribs because sleep doesn't feel safe. Not now. Not when dreams might be used against you. This is a time when confessors are everywhere. The church is tightening its grip, and sins, real or imagined, lurk like shadows in the corners of your mind. You try not to think about the things you've dreamed recently, the flying, the laughing, the strange visitor who offered you bread and said nothing burned in her house. Was it just a dream? Or something darker? People are being questioned, not just for heresy, but for what they dream about. Sounds ridiculous. Not here. Not now. Dreams were considered a reflection of your soul, your temptations, your secret desires, and under the right pressure, they could be twisted into evidence. That strange vision you had last week, a learned inquisitor could decide it meant you were consorting with devils, or worse, harboring sympathy for those who do. So you stay awake, candle flickering, whispering the Lord's Prayer again. You've already said it 10 times tonight, but what's one more for safety? Some monks claimed that nighttime dreams were the devil's favorite playground. Others said that holy visions could only come through a clean heart and an empty stomach. You ate half a turnip and a scrap of bread for dinner, so you figure you've at least got the stomach part down. But the heart, that's trickier. You roll onto your back and stare at the ceiling. There's a water stain shaped like St. Peter if you squint. Or maybe it's just a fish. Either way, it's not helping. And you're not alone in this fear. The Inquisition's obsession with interior life, what you believed, what you thought stretched into dreams. There are records of people being punished for admitting to visions they couldn't control. One woman dreamed of a black dog speaking Latin. Another confessed to floating above her own body and seeing a man made of fire. Both were questioned. Historians still argue whether the church genuinely believed dreams were spiritual battlegrounds or whether it was just another tool for rooting out the impure. But the fact remains, nighttime, once a haven for rest, became something else entirely, a moral minefield. You breathe quietly, hoping your thoughts aren't loud enough for heaven to hear. Worse yet are the sleep disruptions caused by fear. You're not alone in dreading the night. Records show people actively fighting sleep, pacing until exhaustion, hoping to avoid any dream that might land them in the wrong conversation with the wrong priest. It's not a fear of witches, not yet. That's still bubbling. But the seeds are here. The belief that sleep reveals your true self. That rest isn't neutral. It's potentially incriminating. And of course, there were those who tried to game the system. Some believers practiced lucid dreaming, not the fun kind where you fly through candy-colored castles, but controlled dreams meant to root out sin. You train yourself to rebuke the devil inside the dream, to say prayers even in your sleep. You tried it once. You dreamed of a crow tapping on a church door. You told it to repent. It turned into a goat and kicked you in the shin. You woke up feeling strangely proud. You curl tighter into your blanket. The bed is hard. The straw pokes through the linen, and there's a smell of mildew rising from the floor. But that's not what's keeping you awake. It's the knowledge that sleep is no longer private. The next time someone asks what you dreamed last night, you'll lie. You'll say it was darkness, nothing, or maybe angels. Always safe to mention angels. Across the room, someone shifts in their bed. You hear them whisper something, maybe a prayer, maybe a confession. You don't ask. You don't want to know. Morning can't come fast enough. You lie still, eyes open, mind churning. You think of saints who stayed awake for days to avoid temptation. You think of martyrs who saw visions right before death. You wonder if your dream last week where a lamb turned into a door meant anything. You hope not. Eventually, sleep comes. Not gently, not with peace, but like a thief who sneaks in while you're too tired to fight. Your last thought before drifting off. Don't dream anything weird. Spoiler. You do. You're walking the city wall, torch in hand, boots heavy on the damp stone. The night is cold. Not the kind of cold that bites, it seeps, like it's trying to get under your skin and stay a while. You stamp your feet and breathe into your gloved hands, watching the steam rise like a ghost. Welcome to the night watch. While others sleep fitfully, suspiciously, communally, you stay awake. By duty or profession, you're a watchman, a bellman, a lamplighter, a sentinel, one of the silent brigade who guard the living while they dream, or while they try to. Your job isn't glamorous. It involves shouting the hour, checking for fires, making sure no one is sneaking out or in, and keeping a sharp eye out for thieves, or worse, witches, or ghosts, or rats the size of cats that steal from unattended stew pots. Historians still argue whether the average medieval night watcher was more effective security or neighborhood alarm clock, but everyone agrees you were part protector, part human snooze button. You pause at the north corner of the wall. Below you, the town sleeps unevenly. Here and there, a candle flickers in a window. Someone's up late, maybe a mother with a crying baby. Maybe someone grinding herbs they swear are just for medicine. Maybe a priest writing down a troubling dream. You whisper your chant 10 o'clock and all is well. It's not for fun. It's tradition. People like knowing you're out here. It helps them pretend night isn't dangerous. The phrase changes with the hour. 1 o'clock and a fine frost rising. 2 o'clock and thieves take warning. 3 o'clock and the Lord keeps watch. You try not to envy the sleepers. After all, you get paid for this, sort of. But the truth is, there's a peculiar intimacy in being the one awake. You know the city's secrets. Who sneaks out the back door after curfew? Which noble's house always has one light still burning? Where the cats gather like little furry witches? You pass the bakery. The ovens are already being lit. You nod to the baker, who nods back. You don't speak. That's the rule. Words spoken too late in the night feel dangerous. There were other night walkers, too. Not all were paid. Some were sick. Some were cursed. Insomniacs, witches or accused witches, wandering madmen. The townspeople sometimes spoke of the sleepless, those who roamed the dark hours by compulsion, not duty. One chronicler wrote of a man who wandered the streets nightly muttering scripture. convinced that sleep was an enemy sent by Satan to weaken the soul. He died in a haystack, face peaceful for the first time in a decade. You tug your cloak tighter. You've still got miles to go. Not all watchers were armed. Some carried staves or lanterns. Others relied on barking dogs and alert ears. Town criers had to call out danger's fire, plague, flood, or signs from the sky. You once shouted about a moon with a red ring around it. Half the town showed up to pray. The other half stayed in bed. You don't blame them. And then there were the bell ringers. Midnight bells marked not just the hour but the beginning of dreams or nightmares. Monasteries rang bells for matins, cities rang them for curfew. In London, the Great Bell of Bow was once said to be heard across 3 miles, signaling the start of silence. Imagine trying to fall asleep with that bellowing into your chimney flue. Still, there's beauty here. The stars are different when you're the only one awake to see them. They don't just twinkle, they glare, like they know something you don't. You pause at the western watchtower. Look down. A drunk is curled in the shadows, wrapped in a thin cloak, murmuring to himself. You make a note to report it. You don't wake him. Sometimes sleep is safer than the world. You think of your own bed modest, creaky, probably cold by now. You'll get there eventually. At dawn, maybe, unless someone sets something on fire. Again, but for now, you keep walking. You pass rows of shuttered houses, low whispers behind thick wood, people dreaming, people worrying, a few just lying in the dark, eyes wide open, listening for you, because your voice means they're still safe. It's almost 4. You shout 4 o'clock and the frost is biting. Somewhere, someone stirs and turns over, comforted. They'll never meet you, but you've watched over them anyway. And as dawn begins to stretch its pale fingers over the rooftops, you feel the exhaustion press behind your eyes, but also a strange peace. You may not have slept tonight, but others did. Because you didn't. You wake gasping, not quite awake, not quite asleep. Your arms pinned by invisible pressure. Something is sitting on your chest. You can't scream. You can't move. You can only stare into the dark, wide-eyed and utterly frozen. They'll call it a dream. You're not so sure. Welcome to the terrifying intersection of sleep, religion, and suspicion where nightmares become evidence. Dreams become trials, and no one is safe from what they imagine. You've heard the whispers so-and-so dreamt of flying with demons. Another claimed she danced with Satan beneath a tree. And that boy, the one who confessed to nothing, he finally broke after 3 nights without rest and confessed to everything, including turning into a goat. It's witch trial season, and no one is sleeping soundly. You light a candle and sit up, heart pounding. That dream, if it was a dream, felt too real. A shadow in your room, a cold hand on your foot, a voice speaking words you've never heard before but somehow understood. You pray, softly. You don't want to wake your family. You don't want them to know you're afraid. Across Europe, thousands are caught in this web, mostly women, but not exclusively. During the height of the witch-hunting craze in the 16th and 17th centuries, dream testimony became a disturbing cornerstone of trials. People were asked what they saw in their sleep, what voices they heard, what animals visited them in the night. Historians still argue whether this was due to genuine belief or convenient panic. But the records are full of it. A woman dreamed of flying over rooftops. A girl said she saw her neighbor milking toads. A man claimed his wife dreamed too often and too vividly, clearly. She was consorting with dark forces. You look around your room. You've placed a bowl of salt at the window, a sprig of rosemary above the door, a piece of iron by the hearth. These aren't decorations. They're protection. Common folk remedies meant to ward off evil, especially while you're asleep and vulnerable. Your grandmother always said dreams were the devil's back door. That sleep was when he crept in, whispered his offers, made his pacts. She tied a charm around your wrist the night before she died. You've never taken it off. You lie back down. but the shadows in the corners of the room still feel thicker than they should. There's a rustling sound outside. Could be a fox. Could be someone watching. You think of the trial you saw last week. A girl barely older than you said she dreamt of a black dog that spoke with her dead sister's voice. She told her priest, thought she was being pious. That dream was written down and read aloud and repeated until it turned into a confession. You didn't sleep that night either. Dreams in this time aren't just personal. They're political. They're spiritual. They're evidence. And you never know when yours might betray you. Even the judges ask about dreams. Did the accused visit you in sleep? What form did she take? Did you feel a presence while you slumbered? And if enough people say yes, that's enough. Enough to burn. Some people lie. Some really believe. Others, they just want the fear to stop. The manuals used by witch hunters like the infamous Malleus Maleficarum devoted entire sections to dream phenomena. They warned of demons entering the body during sleep, of women riding brooms in spirit while their bodies lay still. Sleepwalking wasn't a disorder, it was a red flag. You've walked in your sleep once or twice. Your brother saw you. You told him never to speak of it. Now you lie awake and listen. Again. Always. The candle sputters. Your thoughts wander to the old woman 2 cottages over. She talks to herself, keeps herbs in her rafters. You saw her once with a crow on her shoulder. People say she never dreams. Others say she never stops. She's next, you think, or maybe not. Maybe someone else will whisper something about your dreams. Maybe you talk in your sleep. Maybe someone's listening. You clench your fists under the covers, not because you're guilty, just because you're afraid someone might say you are. There are no safe places anymore, not even the inside of your head. Eventually, the candle dies. Darkness swallows everything again. You dream you're flying, not high, just above the fields, barefoot and weightless. You see your mother waving from below. You see the town square. You see flames. You wake with tears drying on your cheeks. And when you rise at dawn, you tuck the dream away. Fold it like linen. Hide it. Never speak of it again. Because these days, sleeping is dangerous. But talking about it, that's what gets you killed. The fire is banked. The servants dismissed. You are finally alone. Well, royally alone. You lie beneath a mountain of covers, staring up at a silk canopy embroidered with gold thread and tiny, hand-stitched suns. Your bed is so wide it takes 2 people to make it and 4 to move it. It smells faintly of lavender, candle wax, and linen boiled in vinegar water because royalty doesn't do mildew. But comfort, for you, is just another duty. You are the queen, or the king. Either way, the room you sleep in has a name longer than most people's lifespans. The state bedchamber, designed not only for sleep, but for ritual, ceremony, and political performance. This is where heirs are born, where royal visitors are received, and eventually where the crown might pass to someone else, over your still body. Tonight, it's just you and your nerves. The bed itself is magnificent, heavy, towering, a fortress made of oak, ivory, or in rare cases, silver. The mattress is stuffed with goose feathers. You suspect some of the geese are still angry. It's layered with fine cloths, velvet, damask, silk, all color-coded to your rank. You turn your head slightly and see the silhouettes of your personal attendants curled up on pallets near the hearth. Even as a sovereign, you're rarely alone in your own bedroom. Someone is always nearby, in case you stop breathing or need to expel a ghost. Royal beds weren't always for sleeping. They were for witnessing. A French queen once gave birth in front of 30 people, nobles, priests, and one very confused page boy, because royal births had to be proven. And you better believe deathbed scenes were just as public. That's why many kings and queens kept a second bed, the lit de parade, or bed of state used exclusively for official appearances. You wouldn't actually sleep in it. You'd pose in it to show you were alive, powerful, rested, even if you hadn't slept in 3 days. Historians still argue whether these beds were ever comfortable or just props. The answer probably both. You shift. The embroidered pillow is too tall. The cover's too heavy, but you don't dare toss them off. A monarch doesn't sweat. A monarch perspires graciously. Then there are the rituals. In France, kings underwent the lever and coucher literally, the waking and sleeping ceremonies where courtiers gathered to watch them get in and out of bed. Imagine 40 people watching you put on pajamas while pretending not to stare at your knees. Tonight, no ceremony, just silence. But still, your sleep doesn't come, because the dreams of royalty are never just dreams. Every flicker of your sleeping mind carries weight. Your advisors once asked about a dream you had a white horse galloping toward you through a storm. They whispered about prophecy, a new treaty, a rival prince, or just last night's trout making a comeback. You didn't answer. You never do. But you know how dangerous dreams can be. Queen Elizabeth. I reportedly suffered from horrible night terrors. So did Louis XIV. Charles VI of France believed he was made of glass and refused to sleep near furniture for fear it might shatter him. Some nights, your bed doesn't feel like a safe place. It feels like a trap, a performance, a location for future historians to analyze with dramatic voiceovers. The servants stir. One whispers in her sleep. Another coughs. You stay still. You've trained yourself not to toss or turn. Too much movement, and the court might suspect illness. And if they suspect illness, well, let's just say the vultures are always circling. You think of your ancestors, those who slept in beds soaked in rose water and paranoia. Some were murdered in their sleep. Others died with eyes wide open, refusing rest to the very end. Even now, you feel the pressure of 1,000 expectations wrapped around you like these brocaded sheets. And yet, you sleep. Eventually, because you have to, your dreams come heavy, slow. You are walking through a long hall, lit by floating candles. Faces line the walls. Some you know, some you will know, some you hope you never meet. A voice calls your name. It's your mother, or your heir, or history. You wake just before dawn. The pale light seeps through the stained glass windows. Your attendant stirs and approaches without a word. She places a hand gently near your nose to check if you're still breathing. A habit, a superstition, a precaution. You pretend not to notice. Soon, they'll begin the lever. And you'll rise, smile, command. But in this moment, alone in your great golden bed, you're just another soul struggling to rest in a world where sleep is never private. And never truly yours. You open your eyes to the sound of creaking boards and wind clawing at the seams of the cabin. The hearth has gone out, and the air bites with the kind of cold that feels personal. Welcome to colonial sleep. It's the new world, technically. But you wouldn't call any of this new. The walls are warped, the bed is a frame of rope and wood, and your blanket is thinner than a settler's patience in February. You pull it tighter around your shoulders and sit up, blinking against the dark. Someone's already moving around. Probably your brother, or your father, or a raccoon. You don't check. It's not your turn to chase off wildlife until tomorrow. Sleep here is about as structured as a chicken's afternoon. No strict clock, just sunrise, sunset, and the echo of a distant church bell of the wind's kind. People sleep when they can, in bursts. A long day in the fields followed by early evening exhaustion, a brief sleep, then wakefulness around midnight, then a second sleep if you're lucky, and the roof doesn't leak again. You share your bed. Of course, your younger sibling at your feet, your cousin beside you, and someone's baby wedged diagonally like a log with lungs. The smell is part fire, part livestock, part dirt. You're used to it. You'd worry more if the place smelled too clean. This new land hasn't made sleep easier. In some ways, it's worse. The dangers are different wild animals, distant drums, creaking trees that might be nothing or might be the start of something you really don't want to explain at town meeting. And then there's the religion. Puritan sleep is not relaxing. These are people who worry that dreams may contain hidden sin. That if you fly in your sleep, it's pride. If you fall, it's guilt. If you enjoy anything about your dream, you better repent for that too. One preacher in Salem claimed that dreaming of fruit was evidence of gluttonous desire. Yes, fruit. You had a dream last week about an apple. You haven't told anyone. Historians still debate how much control early colonists thought they had over their dreams. But sermons from the period make one thing clear: even involuntary thoughts were suspect, so you keep your dreams quiet. Even from yourself, you shift in bed. The rope support creaks beneath you. It's always loosening. Sleep tight, people say, because you actually have to tighten the bed ropes regularly. Otherwise, the whole mattress sags in the middle and you wake up shaped like a spoon. And don't forget the bugs. Colonial homes were basically one big invitation to anything with more than 4 legs. Spiders in the beams, lice in your bonnet, fleas in your blankets. Some families hung their beds from the ceiling with chains to keep the critters out. You're not that fancy. Outside, something rustles. You freeze. Could be a deer. Could be something worse. The line between neighbor and threat is paper thin out here. Fear is baked into the sleep culture. You've heard your father pray aloud before bed, begging for protection from both sin and savages, a term that lumps in threats both real and imagined, human and supernatural. Even children are taught to say a bedtime prayer that ends with, "If I should die before I wake." You mutter it sometimes yourself, not because you expect to die, just because everyone else does it, just in case. You remember a story told by your grandmother about a neighbor who dreamt of fire and woke to find her chimney ablaze. From that night on, she never fully slept again, just dozed, in a chair by the hearth, with a bucket of water and a Bible beside her. You think about dreams often more than you should. Last night, you dreamt of walking through the woods barefoot. The trees moved when you didn't look at them, and something called your name not loudly, but like a memory. You didn't tell anyone. Dreams are private, or dangerous, or both. The boards creak again. Your brother shifts and coughs. Your cousin mumbles something about sugar, which makes no sense unless he's dreaming about trade routes again. Eventually, you lie back, try to sleep again. There's work tomorrow, logs to split, snow to shovel, corn to check for rot. Sleep isn't rest here. It's fuel. You don't dream for pleasure. You dream because your body demands a break from hauling buckets uphill for 8 hours. You close your eyes. You drift. And when the rooster crows far too early, as usual, you'll rise, stiff and yawning, pretending you slept well. Because in colonial times, sleep is a war against the elements, the unknown, and your own mind. And the best you can hope for is to survive it without someone asking what your dreams were, especially if they involved fruit. It's loud, not someone snoring loud, not even dog barking at the moon loud. It's machines clattering, hissing, pounding, and it never really stops. You're in a factory town now. Smoke in your lungs, coal under your nails, and sleep somewhere far behind you like a coat you forgot to grab before the storm hit. Welcome to the Industrial Revolution, where humanity trades the softness of candlelight and dreams for gas lamps, shift whistles, and the relentless tick of newly invented time. You lie on your thin mattress, eyes wide open. It's nearly 4 a.m. Your shift starts at 6. If you fall asleep right now, you can get maybe 90 minutes of rest. If the room is small, narrow, you share it with 2 others, and the smell sweat, metal shavings, and someone's feet is a permanent feature. Outside, the cobbled streets glisten with rain and soot. You shift, trying to find a position where the spring under your spine isn't making an impression deep enough to leave a mark. This isn't normal. This isn't natural. And your body knows it. Before the rise of factories, people slept in rhythms that made sense. When the sun set, they rested. When it rose, they worked. But now clocks have invaded the night. Bosses demand time cards. Street lamps pour orange light through thin curtains. Sleep is no longer a rhythm, it's a deadline. Historians still argue how quickly society adapted to this shift. Some believe the change was gradual, others say it was like flipping a switch. But everyone agrees sleep suffered. You're working in a mill, or maybe a textile factory. The hours are long, the shifts rotate unpredictably, and the noise never stops. Even when you're home, your ears ring with phantom machinery. You once dreamed about spools of thread strangling you. You woke up with your blanket wrapped tight around your throat. You didn't tell anyone. You didn't want to get laughed at, or worse, told to get used to it. You look at your roommate. He's already up, pulling on his boots. He works night shift this week. You swap places, like ghosts haunting opposite ends of the same day. The beds are still warm when passed off. No time to change the sheets. Just roll in, roll out. Human rotisserie sleep. Sleep scientists today have a name for what you're experiencing, circadian disruption, but back then it was just called normal life. Gaslighting, hailed as a miracle of progress, is part of the problem. Cities that once went dark are now glowing, buzzing, and alive deep into the night. Shops stay open later. Work shifts stretch longer. The night, once sacred and sleepy, becomes just more time to spend. You remember reading a pamphlet about the danger of overwork. It warned that lack of sleep would lead to madness, crime, and possibly death. You laughed, and then stayed up another hour finishing your shift. The funny thing is, even the bosses aren't sleeping much better. Wealthy industrialists may have better beds feathered, curtained, perfumed, but they lie awake too, worrying about profits, competitors, strikes. The ghosts have changed. They wear waistcoats now. And then there's the train. Oh, the train. It runs at night, just outside the window, shrieking like a steel demon. The first few times, it startled you awake. Now you barely twitch. That's progress, or maybe defeat. Dreams become strange in these years, less symbolic, more fragmented. People report visions of endless hallways, ticking clocks, smoke pouring from their mouths. One clerk claimed he dreamed of filing papers endlessly, even in death. He called it Hell's Archive. You chuckle, quietly. You've had that dream too, and yet, there's a strange pride in it. You and your peers are the first of a new breed modern insomniacs. Sleep-deprived, overworked, but also somehow necessary. The machines don't run themselves. You once met a woman who boasted she only needed 3 hours of sleep. You weren't sure if she was a superhero or a ticking bomb. You lie still, listening to the throb of the city. And you realize something else: the idea of sleep as rest, as peace, is changing. It's no longer a place to retreat, it's a resource, something to be managed, tracked, optimized. Even in these soot-covered years, the seeds of sleep hygiene are being sown. Reformers start talking about ventilation, about mattresses, about working less than 16 hours a day, radical stuff. One factory even tries a rest hour in the afternoon. It fails. No one remembers how to rest. You close your eyes and try to drift off before the whistle screams again. You dream of gears, of clocks, of a pillow that turns into a ledger, and when you wake, barely rested, already late, you do what every industrial worker does. You shake the soot from your collar, grab your cap, and march into the morning with your eyelids still at half-mast, because sleep is broken, and no one's figured out how to fix it yet. The room is quiet, but not silent. Never silent. A soft electrical hum murmurs from your phone charger. The fridge clicks and sighs in the kitchen. A distant dog barks in a rhythm suspiciously close to a beat. You stare at your ceiling, eyes wide open. Again. You live in the era of Wi-Fi and wellness apps, weighted blankets and blackout curtains, herbal teas and melatonin gummies. And still, sleep slips through your fingers like steam. Welcome to the modern night where sleep is a battlefield and your brain is on every side. You roll over, check the time, 2:43 a.m. Not a disaster yet, but close. You could fall asleep now and still get 5 hours. If your brain cooperates, which it won't. You reach for your phone. You know you shouldn't. Blue light, screen stimulation. cognitive activation, all the things the sleep experts warn you about in YouTube videos you watched at 1:00 a.m. last week. But you check anyway. One notification, just one. 20 minutes later, you're doom scrolling. Historians don't need to argue about what broke our sleep in the 21st century. We know. It's everything. Artificial light, shift work, social media, FOMO, anxiety, news cycles designed to spike cortisol right before bed. Your bedroom, once a sanctuary, is now a mini command center. There's a laptop on the floor, a ring light in the corner, an air purifier humming like a polite ghost, a smartwatch face blinking like it's trying to remind you, gently, that you're failing your step goal and your sleep score. You've tried the solutions. White noise machine. Nice, until you associate it with existential dread. Sleep podcasts. They help until your brain decides to fact-check the host. Weighted blanket. Great, until you wake up convinced you're being gently crushed by an emotionally intelligent bear. The problem is no longer just physical, it's psychological, philosophical. Even you lie in bed and start wondering if you're optimizing your rest efficiently. You can't just be tired. You have to be strategically tired. Sleep now comes with stats. Deep sleep 1 hour 12 minutes. REM 53 minutes, times disturbed 4. Overall score 74 100ths. A solid C in unconsciousness. You think of your ancestors, the ones who slept in straw, who shared beds with goats, who muttered prayers into cold, dark corners and feared their dreams. They were tired, too, but they weren't competing with the algorithm. You toss again. Your sheets are soft. Your pillow is memory foam. There's a candle flickering on your desk, lavender-scented, $34. You bought it after a TikTok said it retrained your nervous system. You don't feel retrained. You feel like you're still buffering. Outside, a car passes. A low, wet swoosh across the pavement. Someone else is awake. You feel comforted, briefly. And then your brain taps you on the shoulder and whispers, "What if you never sleep again?" You laugh, quietly, bitterly. You know that's not true. Eventually, your body will give up and shut down. Even if you have to knock it out with chamomile, serotonin, or sheer existential exhaustion, the truth is, sleep isn't just broken, it's overexposed. People talk about it all the time now. There are books, TED Talks, influencer guides titled My 6-Step Sleep Routine that totally works. Except when it doesn't. There's even a booming industry of high-tech pillows and mouth taping. Yes, mouth taping, because in the modern world, we'll try anything short of a medieval exorcism. And yet, every single one of us ends up here, eyes open, mind spinning, heart pretending it's not sprinting. You want to dream? But your dreams now feel like reboots of shows you've already watched. You once dreamt about a Zoom call with yourself, and you were late. You lie still. Focus on the ceiling. Try box breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. You feel your thoughts soften just slightly. You don't fall asleep, but your body loosens. Your grip on the moment weakens. The phone slips from your hand. The candle dies quietly. And for a flickering, precious few hours, you're gone. Gone from the light, from the buzz, from the weight of needing to be awake and fully optimized. You dream of nothing, and it is perfect. So now, here you are. You've wandered through centuries of sleep, some cold, some crowded, some curled in feather beds behind velvet curtains. You've kept watch with monks and night guards, dodged ghosts and dreams that got people burned at the stake. Shared your blanket with rats, imps, or the occasional overly affectionate pig. You've seen sleep used as ritual, as performance, as punishment, and as luxury. You've watched it be sliced in two, sacrificed for prayer, traded for power, and finally, in our time, commodified, tracked, chased, and now it's late, or maybe early. You don't need to check the clock, let it go, because this moment, this soft stretch of dark and quiet, this is yours. You're not a medieval monk or a Roman philosopher or a coal-covered factory worker. You're just you, tired, human, ready. The world will still be there in the morning. The machines, the expectations, the messages left unread, but they can wait. Right now, you don't have to achieve anything, or understand everything, or fix the history of sleep with one perfect night. All you need to do is breathe. Slowly, let your fingers relax. Let your shoulders sink. Let your thoughts drift like dust on a sunbeam. You've done enough. You've heard enough. You've been enough. So sleep. Finally. Like the world isn't watching. Because it's not. Not anymore.